Take 5 soil meeting. And as you know, this meeting is on relay cropping and making it successful in Ontario. My name is Lisa Holland, and I'll be the main host today. My co-hosts who have helped put this meeting together are Christian Stevens and Dave Gowan, along with Robin Bradley, who's going to keep this meeting running smoothly. And like I said, this is the second meeting. Our next two meetings, will be on compaction and strips of all kinds, and strips being strip till, biostrips, and that sort of thing. So keep those topics in mind for next time when you're looking to learn something new, if you're wanting to connect with other farmers and considering new practices or ideas. One other thing I wanted to mention was the Let's Talk Soil online. These are small group chats with a focused topic among farmers that are interested in talking about the same topic. This is to encourage more farmer-to-farmer learning, giving farmers the ability to throw ideas out there and discuss their potentials. We will be sending you the link to the sign up for this after the meeting. So if you're interested, sign up. And now I'm going to pass the mic along to Dave Gowan, who's going to tell us a little bit about the Ontario Soil Network.
Could you share your screen actually, Lisa?
Is it not shared anymore?
No, we had to stop it.
Oh, okay, sorry. There we go. There we go. You can see that now?
Yep, there we go.
Okay, perfect. So if Dave can take it away.
Okay, welcome to our second in our webinar series, and thank you for supporting Ontario Soil Network. The Ontario Soil Network was formed over 3 years ago with the objective of connecting and supporting farmers with the common goal of improving Ontario soils, with a vision of healthy soils, farms, and families today and forever, and a mission of farmers talking to farmers, using the strength of the network to support lasting adoption of sustainable practices for an environmentally and financially sound future. The network engages farmers through training, research, and boots in the field networking opportunities. As we go forward, we're in the process of obtaining not-for-profit status and partnership with farm organizations with goals common to ours. So please enjoy tonight's presentations, and you can follow us on the web at ontariosoilnet.net and on Twitter at Soil Network.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Dave. So tonight we have not 5, but 6 panelists because we found a bonus panelist that we just had to include. Tonight our panelists will be giving a short presentation on their experiences with relay cropping. Then we will be breaking out into hallway huddles to chat in small groups with other audience farmers. Then we will bring you back to the main meeting to have further discussion and answer any questions from the audience to the panelists. And I just wanted to go over some Zoom etiquette. So for all audience members, we're asking you to turn your mics off, as well as turning your video off as well, just to reduce distraction. And if you have any, oh darn, if you have any questions, you can just go to the chat button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and type a question in for any of the panelists at any time. The panelists will either answer the question directly, either vocally, or they will type an answer in. If your question doesn't get answered tonight or immediately, we'll be taking those questions and bringing them to the discussion section at the end of the meeting. And if you want to get in touch with any of our panelists, I just want you to note that just at the beginning of each panelist's presentation, we will have their name, their Twitter, and their email up, just so that you can see that. So now we will get into our presentations. Our first panelist We have Dustin Malik, a farmer whose operation is biologically centered and no-till. To build and maintain healthy soil, he plants multi-species cover crops. He does relay cropping as well as intensive grazing. Dustin follows a regenerative ag program that includes practices of compost and extracts for teas production. Dustin is also the owner of Kawartha Cover Crops, which specializes in multi-species cover crops as well as regenerative ag consulting. All right, Dustin, take it away.
Hi, everybody. Am I in the wrong place? I can't see the slides.
You can't see the slides?
No. Just have take 5.
I'm sharing my screen. Are you guys seeing a picture
I'm
of?
my face with a locator right now.
Okay, so that's where your slides are gonna come up.
Okay.
Okay, so
those then.
yeah, so there's your first slide.
There we go. Okay, well, thanks guys for having me. This has been a journey. We started in 2012. Literally just trolling the internet, found some Twin Row wheat. We've been in Twin Rows for a really long time. It intrigued me. We got looking into it and realized that the might have been University of Wisconsin, I can't remember now, was trialing this sort of thing, and they were having some success. Saw it as an opportunity to put more income into one field, beans and wheat together, and then be able to even take the straw off at the same time for another income. For us here, the establishment of wheat is number one. Just like most of us, we're a shorter day heat unit up here in central Ontario. Getting in early is most important. We're planted with the Twin Row wheat. We're making sure we're using proper populations. We've probably between 1.4 million all the way down to 800,000, and we've had the same yield success. Maybe a few too many tillers if you ask Pete, but so far so good. It's also pulling back on our water use in the season. Switch that one there then. When we're establishing our soybeans in the field of wheat, we travel between late and early. Finding out for us, early is the better. We're getting into better seed to soil, seed to moisture contact early on. The wheat can pull so much out of that soil so fast as it's beginning to mature. It really puts those beans at a disadvantage.
Hey, Dustin,
yes.
Can you sit a little closer or speak up a bit? It's really tough to hear you.
Okay, sorry guys, I apologize. Usually I'm too loud. We're trying to make sure we get seed to soil contact and proper seed moisture. So we're planting deeper maybe than we would on some of our regular crops. We need these to germinate right away. Next slide there. Okay, so I want to kind of concentrate on the end of the process for me here. I got to thank Steinlaghy with all of his awesome innovations he's done over the years. From tile to plastics, we borrowed his ideas to put the covers over the knives, and boy, does that work really well. You cover that section of the knife, and it pushes the beans down. It does a real slick job for a real cheap. I think it's 140 bucks for a 4x8 sheet of 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch plastic. It does a great job of pushing that down. Next slide. When we started out in 2012, we didn't have anything pushing down. So we were literally trying to cut above the beans. We were doing damage to the beans, and we weren't getting the wheat low enough. We found that we have to get that wheat cut off well below the plant, the soybean plant. We want to be able to, two things. We want the bean to bush out above and suddenly receive a whole bunch of sunlight, but we also want to cut that wick as short as possible. That wheat will continue to transpire water out through its stem as it completely dies and falls apart. We can't spare any moisture at that time of the year where we are here. But we like to see the wheat or soybeans bush up and above, and that gives us a lot more what we consider like a reset on our flour accumulation or our flour meter. We start on putting more flour. One thing I didn't forget to mention as well is we use soybeans that would be about 100 to 150 heat units longer than we would normally grow. We want this because our beans will be able to flour later on. We don't want them to be done by the time we get to this point here and not be able to reflower. Next slide. This is what happens when we're early on, when we were trying to clip them low. We were hitting that growing point on the soybean. we're cutting it off, and as you can see, we're getting severe deformation, and the plant growing point didn't want to continue on. That was limiting us on our yield right off the get-go. And as you can see in behind, guys, this is not a perfect science. We've got complete sections of the field that have just killed out on the higher dry areas. We have other areas that are excellent. For us, an average yield around here is somewhere around that 24 bushel. So nothing spectacular with soybeans. Next one. Here's some of the other problems that we ran into. Beans not finishing before frost. Another problem is we have sprayer tracks. We're planting down sprayer tracks with this, obviously this system. And if our soybeans fall on that, we're getting really poor germination in our no-till system. It's just a part of a controlled traffic situation. Weed escapes. We've done some really interesting things with different herbicides, which we can talk about later on if you want. Trying to get these different weeds and control it. Hooded sprayers, of course, your best friend. Don't have one yet. You're going to get one soon. And of course, moisture is the next leading problem. Next there. Okay, so this is what we have settled on in the end is relay Azukis. Everybody hates these things. I have a love-hate relationship with them as well. Click the next screen, I'll show you the reason we use them. We're making lemonade out of lemons here at this point. We found that the volunteer Azukis would grow extremely well in a wheat crop the following year. Give them a little bit of sunshine, a little bit of space, and they would flourish no matter how dry it got, no matter how much the wheat pulled from it, they would do excellent. So I said, well, if we're going to use these, let's use them in a place that's going to make sense. Next there. We can go over this real quick for you guys if you want, but I sat down and did some basic math on our production system here. And I should go back one step. I forgot on the previous screen. The nice part about the Azukis are they're not just a drought tolerant plant, but they're a indeterminate plant. They will go dormant, and when they see the appropriate moisture again, they will begin to reflower no matter what time of the year it is. We have to desiccate them by the end of the year. So they will continue to flower right clean up to frost if we want them to. That's very advantageous for what we're trying to do here. They're not shutting down too early for us. Anyway, otherwise, we have our cost labeled here. You can see at the bottom, when it comes to doing the system together on a wheat year, we're getting a 747 net income on only a 1,200 pound Azuki crop and a 75 bushel wheat crop. If we've got missing spots in our field for winter kill, we've got Azukis growing in that area, so it's not a total loss. And we've also making we have a rotation, and we also have a decent income for that year. That is it, I think, for me.
Yeah, that's everything. Thanks, Dustin. Now, do any of the panelists have any questions or comments for Dustin? Okay, so if anybody has any questions, we'll just bring that back to the discussion section.
So just Dustin, you were a little hard to hear there at the start, and you said that your seeding rate between 800,000 and 1.4 million.
We've trialed from 1.4 million down to 800,000, yeah, and we've been able to match yield at the 800,000 with our conventionally 1.4 or 1.6 million seed 7.5 control plants.
Good. Thanks for clarifying that. Yep.
Okay, so next we have Rick Hendricks. He owns HFL Fabricating, where they design and manufacture agriculture equipment, both for creating their own lines of equipment, as well as doing custom manufacturing and improvements to farmers' current equipment. Rick also farms 600 acres, and that is where they test their equipment out to ensure and determine that their designs are doing what they're intended to do. And Rick will be speaking on Machinery 101, adjustments that can be made to equipment in order to incorporate relay cropping into a farmer's practice, as well as the equipment that he is currently designing for relay cropping. Take it away, Rick.
Alrighty, I guess I need to see my first slide too. All right, so what I've got here is I've got a picture of our relay cropping machine, and I've got some decisions you got to make before you get here, I guess. So the first one obviously is row width. I mean, most of us are on the same width for years and years. A lot of guys are 30 inch, but whether you want to go to twin 30s or or even triple 30s. That wheat was planted in the fall in triple 30s. We can do that with our biomass builder. Sometimes you can't with some of the stuff they have out there. How many rows do you want to plant in each row? That's just touched on earlier. I've lost my screen. I see a dog. There we go. What products do you want to put down? You can put starter fertilizer down with stuff. You can liquid nitrogen seed, whether you go large or small, maybe determine the size of the tanks on the machine. Where do you want to position each product within the row? There is the idea of putting 2 rows of beans down and possibly putting some liquid starter down the center row, or even liquid starter with the actual beans as you're planting your relay, or perhaps even planting your wheat with some fertilizer as well. And then for us, the real question is what other jobs can this machine do for me? We actually started more in the interseeding stance of things, where we were trying to do nitrogen application along with interseeding. We just kind of tripped into this that the machine worked very well for doing relay crops as well. So that's something that you can also tie into a machine if you're going to build something or alter something. Maybe you want to start with your liquid nitrogen applicator and have a look at that and see how you can alter it. The next thing I always think about when I'm doing this is how often are you going to change your mind? So when you're building something, make sure that you can move stuff around. Anyway, I'll show you something in the later slide that shows that. Next slide, I guess. This is a picture of what we are planting with. There's our 3 rows of wheat planted in our beans. We planted our wheat before our beans were off. It kind of works well because we can't get them established either, as Dustin was talking about. We have trouble getting that wheat in, getting it up, and getting it established. This shows what kind of room we have in there. We put crop dividers around our row units because we sometimes have taller beans. This field of beans obviously is not that tall. It's a great way to take a picture of the unit when the beans aren't that tall. So anyway, we can go to the next slide. This guy here, this is an epitome of can I change my mind? This guy here started with a toe type and changed it all around, because the first toolbar you saw and this toolbar are exactly the same. He simply pulled his pins and rerouted what he wanted because he said he was in too small a fields and knocking down too much corn. So you want to look at what kind of weight your tractor can lift when you start doing stuff like this. We've got a weight helper in the back. The weight manager 6000 helps lift the toolbar on this one here. Obviously width is a thing. How many rows do you want to cover? And then the next question is do you want to plant and fertilize in the guest row? So those are all questions you got to answer. And then of course, clearance height's a good thing. If you're going to start using old row units from a 5100 International, you want to make sure that you mount them in a way that you've got enough clearance on your toolbar. So, and again, I keep putting on the bottom there, can I change my mind? You're going to change your mind lots when you get started with this. I'm sure the other guys will say that they've done that too. So we'll go to the next slide. And then of course there's the getting started part. So there's the manufacturer's interseeder. That's what I started with. Just like the mechanic's car, it always looks rough. I've got a small bin on there. I didn't do any wheat with this. I'm mainly doing my side dress application and testing. There's 5, I think, different types of seeding on that thing. And I basically have run that thing for 4 years now, just looking at how everything works. So that's the kind of thing you're going to have to do is start small, start slow, put stuff in the ground and watch it work, watch it not work, make some adjustments. Once you know what you want, then you can go spend the money and get something that's perfect. Anyway, as again, I put down there, can I change my mind? That machine has had many changes of mind. throughout the years. It is now being retired. That's its last year, and we are now ready to build the Cadillac for ourselves. So that's what's all happening. So anyway, I guess that's all I've got.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Do any of the panelists have questions for Rick about what he's spoken about?
Yeah, Rick, I had a question for you. My row units on my machine are custom built. The two row units slid together in a 6 1/4 inch twin, and I've had to extend the rear closing wheel back. Are you having any concerns with cornering with the longer row unit? Are you seeing any issues?
Yes, I would say that cornering is not so easy. What we're working on developing on our next bar is a steering axle on the back to try and alleviate that a little bit. But because I think of the way, like you're running a single disc opener, are you not on that, or is that a double disc opener?
True V opener, yeah, double disc.
True V opener. So I'm gonna say that probably we'd run into the same situations cornering. I think most people plant pretty close to a straight line, so I'm hoping that 90 chances out of 100 that you're not gonna run into too much trouble with it. But
yeah, it'd be your curves on the outside of the field or something like that, right?
Yeah, and I find the biggest problem is trying to keep the rows off your other rows, like not knocking down corn in our case, or wheat or anything, right? So as you're going around the corner, trying to keep your row unit centered in that row.
I have one more if there's no one else. Love your planting in the soybeans. With your shields on there, did you experience any issues with the tractor knocking out soybeans, etc. when you're driving? Do you need shields on the tires there?
So we're a manufacturer of crop dividers. And so our tractor has generally got shields on it, crop shields on it. So we have aluminum crop dividers on our tractor. So for the most part, we cover that way.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Rick. Now from West Union, Iowa, we have Lauren Steinlaghy. He's a farmer who operates 1,500 acres, which includes custom farming. He grows corn, winter wheat, soybeans, cereal rye, malt barley, buckwheat, and sunflowers. His operation is no-till. He uses cover crops to help keep the soil covered majority, if not all year round. And he's always looking to improve his practices for the reason of improving soil health. Lauren is speaking about his experiences with relay cropping over the last 6 years, as well as the train wrecks that he's experienced this year. The mic's yours, Lauren.
Good evening, everybody. First slide there if you want to get ready to rock. I always like to throw in the logistics. That kind of dictates a lot of where we're at and why we do what we do. I mean, the biggest thing I always stress to everybody is our location. You know, we're right on the edge of the glacial till line. And that just, it gives us a lot of diversity in our soil types. And, you know, the key point down there on the bottom is we have 25 different soil types on our home farm. So the diversity is there, and whatever we do has to be adaptable to whatever, you know, pretty much if it works here, it's going to work anywhere. Slide 2. Next slide. Just like Rick, I mean, my entrance into relay cropping started with my interseeding practice. And here you can see the toolbar that this is affectionately known as drill 10. We've actually, you know, much like Rick, we started out with about scrap iron, engineered by inventory into what we have today. Our systems evolved to twin row setup on 30-inch centers, 822 on the gaps, and where am I at here? But building the equipment is probably the key. If you want to jump to the next slide. We've evolved to the point where we're building equipment for others and stuff like that. But on the relay side, you know, my introduction to John Coots in Fort Atkinson, Wisconsin in 2012 is probably what sent me down the relay path. You know, we were very comfortable with the interseeding and stuff like that. we understood the aspect of the companion crops and stuff like that. And initially we started out with John's blocker guards, and then we built into the tile that you see in this pictures, and then built a set just like what Dustin showed there earlier. And now we've evolved to, last year we put together the row crop head that helps us. It's the next step. And I see a lot of times, a lot of people, they don't mind pushing the bean down, but for us, anytime you can avoid pushing that bean down, the better. Next slide. But we've kind of been on a little path here the last 2 years, kind of building up to trying to stay ahead of the curve, because we don't seem to have falls anymore. And with the relay cropping and that, our beans just aren't maturing and stuff like that when we need them to. For instance, last fall we had 6 snowfalls before we actually cut a bean last year, and that doesn't leave for a very good setup for the following year relay cropping. And then like this year, the picture I'm showing here was second week of May. We were down to 21 degrees Fahrenheit, and all our cereal crops were basically brown. But next slide. Next slide, please. We're not down and out. This is some of the attempts we're gonna start looking at to fit the relay cropping into our current system. On the left-hand side, we've got a mini duo seed row unit drill that we built, and that's gonna run down in between our 60-inch corn. And then on the right side, we have the robot that is actually gonna run in between 30-inch corn to drill our relay crop in that fashion. Just everything we're doing is trying to figure out how to expand that window to get our covers in, our relay crop actually established timely, so we can actually get back in where I want to be. My personal goal is next year we probably won't plant any corn. Next slide, please. If everything clicks, this field in this picture, we actually harvested the cereal rye. The soybeans were in there already, and then we'll sneak in a crop of buckwheat and then harvest that with the soybeans. And this year, being I didn't have much for relay cropping, we've got buckwheat. Gave me a good window to get the buckwheat in on a proper time. So these are all, I'm just trying to hurry up here so we don't go over time, but if you want to throw the next slide up there. This is what it all comes down to. Man, that one turned out ugly, but this is what it comes down to me. If you look at the blue is supposed to be orange apparently, but that is kind of the peak carbon sequestration period for all the plants we're planting. And the biggest thing I try to show in this slide is how we're overlapping throughout the years. And next step for us is mastering the perennial covers. So with that, next slide, and that's my contact info if anybody wants to contact me. So any questions?
So Lauren, you said no corn next year at all, like it's not working. You mentioned the robot planting your relay crop. What is your relay crop in corn, or is that more of an interseed cover crop?
Currently we've been interseeding cover crop in the corn. But the way we're set up with some of the 60-inch corn, we're going to send that little drill down through there this year to establish our relay crop. But in the overall picture, my goal is, we can just turn the dollars with the relay cropping, and I'm trying to get to be very low input through these tumultuous times, I guess. And I want to be a low input, high output operation, and the relay cropping does it for us.
So what's your relay crop in the 60-inch corn?
Well, the upcoming relay would be we'll relay right to the rye. The rye will go in here about black layer probably.
Oh, okay, I see. So the 60-inch corn, and then wait to plant the rye crop until the corn is almost mature.
We actually, we have interseed legumes in there right now. And with the, that will terminate that after harvest. If it's depending on what all happens here. But like I said, it's my personal goal. But I've had this goal being 100% relay for how many years? But as Mother Nature unfolds, this year I was going to be about 65-70% relay, and we have 0. So.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Lauren. Now we have Rob Dunn from Lethbridge, Alberta. Rob is a cropping systems specialist at FarmWise Inc., where he provides agronomy and cropping systems services for farm and ag clients for the past 6 years. Rob is also the cropping systems specialist for Alberta Ag and Rural Development, which is the provincial ag department. And he will talk about how farmers are relay cropping in southern Alberta and how what they're doing can translate into Ontario practices. And he'll also touch on intercropping, which is more widely used in Alberta.
Thank you. So yeah, we'll get right to it here. And the main thing is that I work with a group of several farmers that have worked on these things over the years. And of course, I'm sort of, step one or two steps back in terms of looking and trying to understand the system, understand the impacts on soil, some of those things. If you look at the Alberta situation compared to any of our other speakers today, we obviously, because of our shorter growing season in the province, there's really not much opportunity. We don't have a lot of heat units for the majority of the province. And so relay cropping per se is fairly limited potential. Where we do have a bit more opportunities in southern Alberta and our higher heat unit irrigated areas. And there we're kind of in an, we would be 125 to 135 days of growing season. And as Lauren mentioned, that was sort of clipped short last year. We had the same kind of, issues across, the northern Great Plains and of course the northern Midwest area of the US. But so that opportunity on irrigation over the years could describe it as, often it's a spring cereal for silage or sometimes for grain, and that could be underseeded to a relay, and that's often used for fall grazing. So we're very seldom would we ever have the opportunity to get that second grain crop in a relay situation. So that relay may be a winter cereal underseeded, it may be annual ryegrass or some clover species, or often a combination of the above. And the one that I probably should have mentioned there too is that same kind of approach can be used and is used with winter wheat, where typically winter wheat where we go in and seed in the spring, and often that's seeded sometime just after the an annual ryegrass or a combination of ryegrass and clover seeded in the spring. So we're not seeing a lot of that, but it is used from time to time. The other one, which is more of we'll call it a double cropping kind of scenario, where we have a winter cereal taken off for forage. Often our grain is too late in this situation because we've, even this year, we've got, in some cases, we've got winter wheat right now, which is just about a week or 10 days after anthesis. So that's how late we are in a year like this. So then that would be planted to a fall cover. So taken off as a forage, planted to fall covers. Often if it's a spring cereal, it would most often be oats. And at times we'll see warm season grasses in there. A forage sorghum or a millet does well in our higher heat unit areas. Again, on irrigation, sometimes the forage brassicas, the number of different brassicas that are used here. I think you'd be familiar with all of those. Hairy vetch or pulse crop is not uncommon in that mix. And so what we're often seeing is a diverse mix, which is suitable as forage or grazing. And then that is, sometimes just for soil quality purposes, but usually that's tied in with some livestock grazing in the fall or harvested as a second forage crop, a silage crop. Next slide. So on dry land, our opportunities where we have the growing season, typically our precipitation is quite low. So we'd be a 14-inch growing season. 150 millimeters of that is in our three-month growing season. So obviously we don't have a lot of moisture that we can use for growing a second crop, on dry land. So the main focus, would be, grain intercrops, not really a relay crop situation. We see a lot of interest and some experience with pea, with either canola or mustard, and a few of the guys I work with are doing that successfully. And chickpea or lentil with flax isn't uncommon, but it would be, of course, the challenges with having to separate those. So, and I think a number of guys are also looking at and experimenting with the potential for kind of a companion crop situation for soil health or fall grazing. And of course, there's those on dry land, there's those trade-offs with yield, because water is scarce. And it certainly hasn't worked well the last couple of years, because we've just come out of a 3-year drought. And this year we've got pretty good crop coming, but everyone's been a little gun shy in some of these things. So those overwintering covers obviously are a bit of a challenge for us, competing for seedbed moisture that next spring. Very risky for dry land. We pretty much have to terminate, our covers in the fall on dry land, or have something that's going to, self-terminate with the winter. Underseeded clover, sometimes sweet or others, as a forage or green manure that next spring, then a partial fallow, and then planted to a fall cereal. So that's something that you do see from time to time. So just the next slide's a couple of examples here. Here's a barley grain. In this case, just picture taken last week on farm at Claresholm, Josh Fankhauser's farm. And you can see the annual ryegrass underseeded to the barley. And then that would be just a picture from one of the last couple of years where he uses a stripper header, strips off, so we've harvested the barley. And you can see the annual ryegrass coming, that's used for grazing. So throw some water, throw some fertilizer at it in the fall. And that the other slide there, which is in the bottom left, is just an example this year. So out in the dryland area where this is Andy Kirschman out by Hilda. He's got alfalfa underseeded to wheat. And so we're trying that as a kind of a companion crop, looking for soil health benefits, see if we can get alfalfa established there. And so there's a little bit of, some attempts to look at that system, and we're evaluating that. Next slide.
Okay, just have 1 minute left. Okay, Rob?
Yep. So here's some covers here with, this would be after a winter cereal. We're looking in September here at the growth that we've got to graze. So that's a winter cereal seeded on irrigation to a diverse mix. And just that next slide, obviously we're grazing that through the winter. Picture the cows there. And you can, the pulse oilseed grain intercrops. We talk about chickpea, flax. Here's a pea canola example. Next slide. And just some research, if you're ever interested, it's looking at oilseed seeding rates and the role and fate of nitrogen, some labeled in. And we'll kind of cut it off there. The last slide I had really just talks about some work that we're doing with timing of rye crop removal ahead of planting canola. And I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Is there any questions for Rob out there from our panelists? Okay, well, thanks, Rob. Next up, we have Peter Johnson. He's currently the agronomist for realagriculture.com, where he does weekly podcasts called Wheat Pete's Word, providing weekly updates on cropping info and answers to growers' questions. He was the provincial cereal specialist with Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. And he also farms 300 acres and does quite a bit of research with the Middlesex Soil and Crop Improvement Association. Go ahead, Peter.
Super. Thank you very much, Lisa. So if you can just advance to the first slide. So I don't know, that video may not play very well over the internet, but this is just one of our plots. As Lisa said, we Middlesex Soil and Crop and my technician Shane McClure, we do many different plots across a fairly wide geography. And I just thought that kind of gave you an indication of, that's one of the best plots that we've ever managed to put together was at Belmont. And so over 2 years, we have 6 sites of data that we've worked at with this. We have another 2 sites planted this year. And you can see that combine is actually running pretty well between the soybean rows. We're clipping a few leaves. We actually just use drainage tile over the knife. We're not quite as highly technical as Dustin and the rest of them, mostly because it is just small research plots and we're not doing hundreds of acres. But you can also see that we do miss a little bit of wheat, that it just seems to be hard to get all the wheat and not do damage to the soybeans. And we're trying hard not to do damage to the soybeans as we move through this. So if you could advance, please, Lisa. So what I've done is I'm a data guy, sorry. So I'm going to hit you with some data. What I did out of the 6 sites of data that we have so far, I took the very worst and I took the very best. So 2018, Lucan, that's the worst site that we have to date. We're going to have another one in 2020, unfortunately. But what we're looking at here is just how much wheat yield do we lose? And so we grew twin row wheat without soybeans to see if we actually, lost more yield where we grew the twin row wheat with the soybeans. And you can see on that site that we're giving up, I don't know, 12% in yield, something like that, but even more with the soybeans because we're not getting all the wheat. We also wonder if when we plant the soybeans, we're doing a little bit of damage to the wheat roots, that as we plant the soybeans, we're slicing through some wheat roots, and does that actually hurt them? In 2018, the relay soybeans yielded 0 because we just had no rain. So it was like Rob talked about in Western Canada. And so we had a 0 soybean yield. The Czech soybeans, same variety planted, 75 bushel per acre, an unbelievable soybean year. And that was rainfall in August. So June was super dry and the beans just didn't make it. Belmont in 2019, that's where you saw the combine running on the first slide. Very poor wheat. I mean, gosh, we got to be able to grow better than 64 bushel wheat. You can see that where we grew the twin row wheat with the soybeans, we're still taking a bit of a hit on wheat yield, but not too terribly bad. And the relay soybeans at 18 bushels. So that's sort of the game we've played in most of the time with a good field, is kind of that 18, 19, 20 bushel soybean crop seems to be about the best we can do. The Czech soybeans at 56, and the average there, you can see, we're losing, I don't know, somewhere in the range of 10% in soybean yield if we could get, or pardon me, in wheat yield, if we could get all the wheat in the combine, went to better technology, a row crop head or something like that. We're still going to lose 10% in wheat yield. And we got to get up to that 20 bushel soybean yield to make this work. So if you could advance then, Lisa. And so this is just the economics. I think, again, the worst, the best, and the average. Just look at the advantage on the right-hand side. I think that tells the story. That Lucan site, we lost $127 doing the relay intercrop. The Belmont site, we actually made $142. Now, the $142 is gross income. It's not net. We didn't charge ourselves anything for planting the soybeans. So you have to back that out for the soybean seed. So there's a number of costs there that you'd have to back out from that. But nonetheless, man, if I could make an extra $100 an acre, I'm pretty excited about that. It's just that we have to figure out how to be a little more consistent. On average, we made $28. And when you take the added costs, it just, we aren't going to keep doing it if we can't do better than $28. So Lisa, if you could advance. And so, yep. So essentially, we have a bunch of different issues. Weed control is one. We skipped that slide, but man, one of the things, you can see where we have 7.5-inch row wheat, man, we have great weed control, right? Great weed control because of crop competition. Where we have twin row wheat, we've had lots of weed issues, particularly grass weeds, which rarely, if ever, are a problem in winter wheat. We've had lots of issues with grass weeds. Next, Lisa. So the soybean stretch, that's, man, you can see there, it's maybe a little bit tough to see, but you know, we're getting 8, 9, 10 inches, even 11 inches of stretch between the ground and the unifoliates, because in a good wheat crop, those beans are so heavily competed against, they stretch like crazy to get up there. And of course, then they're weak and spindly, and lodging becomes an issue. Next, Lisa, please. Lodging, yeah, it certainly. So two things from a lodging standpoint. One that the soybeans will lodge on us if they get really spindly like that. The other thing is that this year we had a tornado go through near our Lucan site, and the only wheat that lodged when that tornado went through last Saturday, was the wheat where we had the soybeans. The twin row wheat without the soybeans leaned, but it didn't lodge. The twin row wheat with the soybeans actually knuckled over, and the heads were almost on the ground. So that's, if you get lodged wheat, it becomes very tough to have relay cropping. So that's another just kind of issue to watch for. Soybean maturity at Bornholm 1 year, the exact same variety planted the same day, relay intercrop in the soybeans versus the full field of soybeans. The full field of soybeans matured fine. The relay intercrop were not mature. And that surprised us. We did not think that they would delay in maturity that much. We've tended to go to a longer season soybean, but man, if you're in a short season year, that could bite you from a seed quality standpoint. Go ahead, Lisa. And then water. Rob talked about it. Dustin talked about it. That's the real crux of the issue. A dry June, we're in big trouble. So if you go ahead again, and that's what happened to us this year in 2020. And so that's just showing you the wheat, how it broke down. And I hope you can see the soybeans are actually dead. So in the last, 2 weeks before harvest, 40% of the beans at that site actually died. And most of the other beans were like the beans on the left. They were alive, sort of, but they were not going to amount to anything. And so we lost this plot. In order to harvest the wheat and not give up a lot of wheat, because you can see how it's crinkled down, we're only going to have one site of good data, or we'll have 2 sites of data, but 0 soybean yield again on the Lucan site. So if you move ahead, Lisa. So the best case scenario, I really think if you want to make this work, it's late planted wheat. The wheat cannot be too competitive. If you have really competitive wheat and you don't have moisture, the beans just don't make it. There's a 10% wheat yield loss, and it's tough to bale the straw. I know that some people have figured out how to do that, but if straw is part of the income, that plays. The maximum soybean yield we've been able to get is about 20 bushels per acre. We don't always get that, obviously. And so as I think about what we might do, maybe we should be doing like they do in Ohio and planting the soybeans into the wheat, a bit like Rick is doing with his wheat into soybeans, but just 2 to 3 weeks before we harvest that wheat, go in and plant those soybeans so that they germinate and emerge, but they don't get into this stretch. They're not trying to compete with the wheat crop. And I really like Dustin's Azuki beans. The problem is that I grow soybeans on farms where the growers don't grow Azuki beans, and once an Azuki bean grower, always an Azuki bean grower. And so I just have not introduced that weed onto those growers' farms. But I think that probably has the most opportunity. And I think that's it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Peter. Does anybody have a quick question for Peter and what he's spoken about?
Peter, it's Woody. Do you do any band spraying between the wheat rows when you do the soybean planting?
So Woody, that's an excellent question. And no, we have not been doing band spraying. I didn't talk about herbicides. We spray the wheat crop with Buctril M, so bromoxynil MCPA, before we plant the soybeans. And for broadleaf weed control, we've had pretty good luck. it's been the grass weeds that have really kind of bit our butt from that standpoint.
Okay, great. And finally, we have our bonus panelist, our sixth speaker, Rick Koetstra. He is a farmer of 2,000 acres of cash crop and a poultry operation. He has been doing relay cropping for 3 years and is really excited about this year's crop. He's also actually a member of the Ontario Soil Network. So Rick Koetstra will be speaking on the time and spacing needed when relay cropping. Take it away, Rick. So Rick, we have your first slide up of your early wheat. Rick, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Thanks, Lisa, for having me on, and thanks to the Soil Health Network. I've got a few slides and a short presentation here tonight. Been growing relays for 3 years now, and we've learned quite a bit. We are twin row with a 22.5-inch gap, so it's twins with twin 30s. And you'll see in the first slide there, we usually plant 650 to 700,000 seeds of wheat, which has worked really well for us. So in the 3 years, and I just finished combining today, we can get wheat to yield between 80 and 105 over the 3 years. I won't recite all the data because of time, but wheat does really well. So next slide. So that's how I plant. I have a 12-row stack fold, and it's a single row up the middle. And we'll plant that at 120 to 130,000 seeds. Usually about a 2,700 heat unit bean. Our area here is 2,850. Next slide.
Okay.
And there we are with the stack fold again, as you can see, going up the field. So these past years, the past 3 years, wheat has probably come away as, in my view, one of the most exciting crops I've seen in my years. And I didn't really realize how powerful wheat can be. But you can plant only 700,000 seeds, and that wheat will tiller, and it'll take that whole field over. It just keeps sending out shoots and heads until it's full. And you'll see in an upcoming slide, it'll show you this umbrella or a mushroom of wheat, and it's full. So we've discovered in the last months that to do this correctly, we need to really pull back on our wheat and teach it or train it to not interrupt the soybean, not getting in the way of the soybean. So to think about this, you should know that June 21st is the longest day of the year. We get maximum sunlight. After that time, it starts to go down. We get less every day, and you all know that. But the soybean is buried in that straw, and it can't see the sun. So when I finally release it to the sunshine, like I've done in the last few days or week, I'm actually saying to the soybean, well, there you go, it's your chance. And the soybean is dry, it's lost moisture, it's lost time, it's short, and we're expecting this racehorse to take off. And I'm thinking now we must reduce our wheat to the point that that soybean has daylight almost right away and never really loses it. So at the end, and you can advance the slide, the next one.
Okay.
You can see the mushroom there, and if you got really good eyes, you can see a bit of a greenish tinge in the middle. So that's the soybean. So what you'll see, what you should see is this soybean should be the same height as that wheat right now in that picture, and it's not. And that's why soybeans are the bean of choice, because they will get to the same height as wheat and actually push that mushroom back straight. So now the wheat and the beans are the same height, and that's the ideal harvest time, and will also give you the maximum soybean. So you advance the slide again.
Okay.
Yeah, and just go right to the last one.
This is the last one that I have.
Okay, well, there's one more that we've missed out on, but it shows where I removed the wheat, and what you see, I removed the wheat 3 weeks ago, and what you see is a soybean that's past my knees and full of flowers and ready to roll. So it's showing us that we've really not given our soybean a chance. We've got this idea that you can plant the wheat and then magically this bean is going to give us 40 bushels sometime later in the fall, and it won't happen unless you give it space. So we have to learn to share that space between the wheat and the bean. There's a few people that are noteworthy in this that I watch, and of course is John Coots in Wisconsin, and Jason Mauk and Tim Boring and Lauren, who's on the call today. These are guys I watch, and as you start this system, if you so desire, you will learn and you will come away with different ways of thinking about it, and you'll tweak it to your own region or soil type or heat unit type or whatever you have. It isn't, there's no template, and well, 2 or 3 things as well. One that really keeps me in the game is economics. This is such a cheap crops to grow, and yet the economic outlook at the end is quite high. So the return to land and management is very competitive, if not higher than the others. As well, you can learn to relay between crops and relay from, well, if you wanted to grow soybeans and then relay into a cover crop such as buckwheat or some of the others earlier in the season. So you're not forced to plant things in a potential snowstorm at the end. We're short season here. We're in the north. This is the center of Huron County in Ontario, and we use what we have, and what we do what we can. Going further or going into next year's outlook for me, yeah, I'm going to make some changes. Yes, I'm looking at tire options. I'm going to change my header, but the biggest change for us will be changing populations to try and control the wheat and make our soybeans better. So thanks.
Okay, are there any questions from panelists for Rick Kootstra about what he's been talking about?
I've got one. I'm just wondering, Rick, what kind of yields do you expect from your beans, say this fall even?
This is our best bean year of the 3, and I had an agronomist stop in and have a look. He's thinking 25 bushels. I think more. I'm thinking there's somewhere between 30 and 40, but it'll be depending on the next 2 weeks of weather.
Right.
I took a field off 6 days ago, and those beans are now 4 inches taller than the stubble. So they're moving on, and that's encouraging.
what have you gotten in the past? Like what, I know you learn every year and you should get better at this every year, but what did you get, say, last year?
0.
Oh, 0. Okay.
I didn't get them planted. It rained every day.
Yeah. Okay.
First year, we got 12 or 13 bushels, but the first year wheat was 86. The second year wheat was 107. And this year's wheat is somewhere between 80 and 90. Probably 90 would be the average of those two fields.
I averaged really good on my wheat too. In fact, I did a plot right beside some standard wheat and it out yielded the standard wheat.
Yeah, I believe it.
So.
All right, that's great, Rick and Rick. I guess that's all for our panelist presentations for now. And just on the screen are kind of our takeaways that we've sort of talked about tonight. And I just wanted to put in one last plug for our Take 5 session. Our next session is on compaction at the end of August, and followed by our strips of all kinds meeting in September. So keep an eye on Twitter for updates and panelist videos, just discussing those. And now we're going to move on to our hallway chats. So for our